have you ever felt empty or alone, like you didn't fit in someplace? Like, or that, no matter how hard you try, it just isn't enough to be accepted? Have you ever felt like, especially maybe in church, that you feel like you're too far gone or you've done too much bad for a good God to have anything but maybe even pain and heartache towards? And when you experience that pain, you feel like, yeah, you know what, I deserve that. Or you look around at everybody else's life and wonder, why me? Like, why do the good things happen for everyone else and not me? That's a pretty exhausting place to be. And what I would say is we all kind of enter ebb and flow in that kind of mentality at times. And what I would say is what we need to combat that is what would be biblical rest. And that's what we're going to see in Ruth chapter 3 in a unique lens that we're going to put on this passage in Ruth chapter 3, just so we can all be on the same page to recap what we've been talking about. Naomi and her family, her husband and 2 sons, they had to leave Bethlehem. A couple of weeks ago, we looked at this in chapter 1. They had to leave Bethlehem because of a famine. People were dying. They didn't have enough food. And they had to go to the land of some of their enemies, the land of Moab. And while they're in Moab, her husband, Elimelech, he dies. Her daughters marry Moabite wives, and then 10 years later, they die. And so now Naomi and these 3 widows are sitting there. They don't really have much to hold on to. Women didn't really have a big voice in that culture. And so Naomi, the kind of matriarch of the 3, she decided, hey, let's head back to Bethlehem. I hear that the Lord is providing for the people of God there now. So as they're going back, she tries to convince the girls, the Moabite, her daughter-in-laws, to go back home. One of them, Orpah, does. She's like, you know what? I'm out of here. Life is going to be easier in Moab. But Ruth clings to Naomi and promises to be there with her. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. I will not abandon you even through death. And so they get back to Bethlehem. The town is stirred. And then we see Ruth wake up and she seeks a place to glean or to pick up scraps. The picture is like she starts collecting tin cans to get to make a little bit of money to pay for her and Naomi to eat. And she finds herself in the field of Boaz. And Boaz is a kind and upright man who is extremely generous towards his people, but also specifically towards her. And come to find out, when she tells Naomi about Boaz, Boaz is actually a relative of Naomi's, and he could be what they call a kinsman redeemer, meaning that he could help them. And Ruth actually gets to work in his fields for a couple of months, make a lot of money, feed her and Naomi. But the way the last chapter ended is like the season ends, and now what is going to happen? Are the women, are they going to be back in danger? Are they going to go back to a period of emptiness? That's where we left off. And let's pick up in verse 1 of chapter 3. It says this. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will then tell you what to do. So what we see here is Naomi, the mother-in-law, who what we saw in the first 2 chapters was she was in a really bad spot, like emotionally. Her family her boys have all died. Her husband has died. She was mourning. She was in a really bad place. But now it feels like the dust is kind of coming up. She can see a little bit clearly. And she's like, let's get Ruth married. Operation Get Ruth Married. She's thinking about Ruth's future after she dies, because it's one thing for Ruth to endure widowhood in a strange land during Naomi's life, but quite another if she was gone. So she's like, let's get you married. And she says a unique phrase, should I not seek rest for you? Right? She didn't say like, should I not seek a husband for you? But she says, seek rest for you. And really, it's a callback to chapter 1 when Naomi tries to tell Ruth to leave. And Ruth clings to her. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And she says, may the Lord give you rest. And now she's saying, let's find rest for you. And rest, biblical rest, is a picture of fulfillment of God's promises to a person far from accepted, this Moabite person, this idea that the fulfillment of God's promises, rest, like Sabbath rest, is not simply relief from work, but it's a reminder that of God's finished work in both creation and in redemption, that we can enter into rest because God is holding all these things together, that he is working all these things out, that we are not the ones holding it all together, that God is. There's this sense of completion in rest. And what she's saying is, like, let's find completion for you. Let's find wholeness for you. And so here's the plan. The target is Boaz. Right, you can kind of see like she's writing up on the board. Like, all right, here's Boaz. He's a close relative of ours. He is a good man. Let's get you married to him. All right, and the threshing floor is the location. This is this public space where they would separate the grain from the chaff. It would be at the It's at the bottom of this hill, and it's kind of like this wind tunnel. And what would happen is they would take the grain. It was really high tech. They'd take the grain and they would throw it up in the air. And the wind would blow the light stuff down, and the heavy stuff, the kernels and stuff, the stuff that you needed, it would fall to the ground. So the chaff would fly down, the stuff that you didn't really need would fly down, and it would separate itself. They would just keep throwing it until all the chaff is on one side and all the good stuff, the kernels, are on the other. And so this is public space, right? The whole town would share this. And then what they would do is they would collect the good stuff, and they'd pile it up in the corner, and someone else could use it, right? And so that's the location. It's this public space, and the question that we need to begin to ask ourselves is this: why at night is she setting Ruth up for some sort of scandal? Like, there's a lot of undertones, even sexual undertones in this passage. And it's like, hey, what's going to happen? What is she doing here? You're watching, you're kind of like, all right, everything was really honorable up at this point. So now it feels a little bit like, what's happening? Because culturally, that would kind of be inferred when you're talking about going to the threshing floor. And so she tells her, wash, anoint yourself, dress yourself, right? Prepare yourself. Really present yourself as a bride to be. You're no longer a widow. Clean yourself up, wash your face, put on some perfume, look good, present yourself as a bride to be to Boaz. And but don't reveal to yourself to him right away. Let him finish working. Let him eat. Have a good time. And let him go to sleep. And then go over to his feet. Go over to where he's sleeping. Go over to his feet and uncover his feet, which is pretty annoying. Let's just be honest, right? That's there's strategy in there, right? Uncover his feet and lie down there at his feet and wait for his instructions. That's what she tells him. This plan, the timing of this plan, the meeting place, it's a gamble, right? Naomi is putting out a risky situation for Ruth, but if it pays off, it could be worth the gamble. With all these undertones it could easily be misinterpreted. Boaz could easily misinterpret it. Would he choose to take advantage of the situation, or is he going to be noble and honorable and righteous? And so look at verse 5. Ruth, she replied, "All that you say, I will do." So she understands what's going on, understands the plan. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And then Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry. He went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. So Ruth understands it's time to execute. She goes down to the threshing floor, right, the location. She watches Boaz, the target. She sees him eat and lie down. This is the setup. And then she sneaks over there. In the cover of darkness, she sneaks over there and uncovers his feet and lies down. She does exactly what Naomi said. What's going to happen? As we read this, like, what is going to happen? He's going to wake up. How is he going to respond? There's this anxious moment have you ever been in a place where you've done all that you can do to set yourself up for success, and now everything rests in the hands of someone else? That's where Ruth is right now. She's done everything that she's supposed to be. How is Boaz going to respond? Look at verse 9 or 8. And at midnight, the man, not Boaz, the man. You can see, like, even the way the story is being written, there's like a veil of who these people are even. You can imagine if we're watching this movie, it's a silhouette. No longer seeing Boaz's face, you just see the man. It's a silhouette. He was startled or shivered, and he turns over, and behold, a woman, no longer Ruth, right? Silhouette, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." So it's late at night. He's asleep. Kind of his identity is being veiled, and his feet are uncovered, and he wakes up because it's cold, and his feetsies are out, right? My wife would say, "Didn't you tuck the comforter in before we went to bed?" Right? Like that's the idea, right? His feet are cold. And lo and behold, he turns over and a woman is there in front of him. Her identity is concealed by darkness, but you could imagine that he could smell her. Like, oh, there's something nice. There's a pleasant aroma around, and he sees this silhouette. So this honorable Israelite man finds himself face to face with an unknown woman in a secluded corner. What will he do? Will he wake up angry? Will he wake up delighted? Will he be embarrassed? His question was, "Who are you?" In chapter 1, or in chapter 2, when he interacted with Ruth the first time, that's not his first question. He asked, "Whose are you?" An ownership question, a where is she connected to question. But now he asks, "Who are you?" An identity question. And Ruth responds in a really profound way. She says, "I am Ruth, your maidservant." Not the Moabite foreigner, but a woman eligible for marriage. She has followed the script from Naomi perfectly. She's an eligible woman in front of a righteous man, but then she pivots. She pivots, and she said, "Spread your wings over me." This is her making sure Boaz knows who she is. Because when he met her in chapter 2, when she was in his field, he said to her that God's wings she has taken refuge under, that God has protected her and brought her into his family, that God's wings she has found refuge in. And so Ruth is saying, "Hey, spread your wings over me." Remember? is also a play on words. In their world, that term would be a reference to marriage as well. And so she is very clear about her intentions. She's like, hey, I'm a woman ready to be married. But then she takes it one more step further. This is interesting. This is not what Naomi asked her to do. She says, for you are a redeemer. So she's not simply asking him to marry her, but actually asking him to marry her so that he might be able to provide an heir for Naomi. If she would have never mentioned Redeemer, they could have just gotten married and lived happily ever after. But Naomi, she's not protected anymore. She's not guarded anymore. But what Ruth is saying is, come and redeem my family. Marry me so that we might produce an heir for Naomi to raise. And then we can have our kids. She gets first dibs, and then we can raise our family. What loyalty do we see from Ruth in this moment? She did not have to do this. This is not what Naomi had asked for or what she planned or even maybe what she wanted, but this is what she does. So how is Boaz going to respond? Is he going to be frustrated with that? Like, man, I thought you wanted me. He says this, so beautiful. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Remember the racial undertones that we were talking about? Like, she was different, and everyone, every step of the way, reminded her that she was a Moabite. But now there's a buzz around town that this Ruth, she is a worthy woman. She is different than us, but she is very much worthy. And now it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. You can imagine, like, all the music is playing, like it's going fast, and then like all of a sudden it just stops. Hey, I'm going to help you out, but I need you to let you know that I can't marry you. There's someone else that's closer in line to marry you. What? So he said, remain tonight, and in the morning he will redeem you. Or if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. So lie down until the morning and get your rest. And he is pleasantly surprised by Ruth's posture. He calls her blessed. This is the latest act of kindness is so much greater than your previous acts of kindness, of your loyalty towards your mother-in-law, for all the things that you've done towards your mother-in-law. And yet now you didn't have to, and you still went another mile. Wow, you are a worthy woman. Everyone in our community has seen this, and you have not gone after any other men that you could have. You didn't pursue, you chose family loyalty over love or even money, because she could have married rich, she could have married poor. She's not gone after any of these men. And he said, now I will do everything that you ask. I'll help. We've seen your character. You're a worthy woman. I will help. But there is some business that I must handle first. There is a redeemer closer. And so I don't know about you, if you're curious as to like, okay, hold up. So Ruth and Naomi have been struggling for months at this point. Clearly, Boaz knows that there's a redeemer closer than him to Ruth and Naomi. Why hasn't this person shown up to help? Right? Why hasn't this other person that is able and willing and actually supposed to intercede and help, why hasn't he shown up on the scene? He's just been leaving her, these two widows, high and dry to fend for themselves. Ruth is busting it in the field, and why is this guy? But he still gets first dibs? Like, what? This is so weird. What are they waiting for? Were they like, oh, well, maybe you go? Or was this the reason why Boaz hasn't made a move? Because you're reading the story and you're like, man, there's definitely some chemistry between Ruth and Boaz in the field when he's delivering her food and he's being kind and generous. Why hasn't Boaz made a move? There was 2 months and Naomi was hoping that Boaz would make a move and nothing happened. You're wondering like, oh, does he not like me? Is he not interested? What's going on? Maybe this is it. Maybe he started to make the move and he found out that someone else it's their priority. And so he says to her, stay here tonight. He actually uses this term lodge here tonight, which is really, really important. And we miss out on these words because it's not in the original language. He uses this word lodge here tonight. So all of like the sexual innuendos are happening in the story. Like, hey, what's going to happen? She's lying at his feet. Like, is there some funny business happening? He takes all of that and squashes it and says lodge here tonight. It is a very platonic word. It is a very like, hey, there's no funny business happening. And it shows that they're both righteous. And he's going to protect her physically, but he's also going to protect her reputation. And he says, tomorrow I will handle this the proper way. And Boaz, he's a good dude. And so he says, so she lay down at his feet until morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, so they're both waking up early, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring your garments that you're wearing and hold it out. And she held it out, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. I mean, it's this picture, right? Like, if you remember, those of you that have been married for a while, like, you're going to have to remind yourself of, like, that first time that you, like, hung out with your significant other. Right? There's so much excitement, right? It's like, oh, I can't wait they both wake up before anyone else does. They're like, this is the day, like this could happen. Like, I like this girl and I like this guy. And they're both awake really, really early. And Ruth is kind of like, well, what do I do with my hands? And she's like, okay, I have an idea. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I don't want anyone to see you and say, oh, look at Ruth. So take your shawl. And there's something that you need to understand about the shawl. It's this piece of fabric that working women would actually hold their baby in while they're working. So think about like those wraps, right? You know, I'm talking about where they put the baby in and your arms are free. It's one of those types of things. So take your shawl, the thing that working women would put their babies in, and he fills it with grain. What is this for? What does this mean? And this action should be seen as a sign of the promise that he's making to her, but also a foreshadowing of her womb being filled. Remember, she went 10 years with her husband and no baby. So I wonder if she's curious, like, man, am I even able to get pregnant? He gives her this grain and this thing that you carry your baby in, and he sends her home. And look at how Naomi interacts. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did you fare, my daughter? Then she told her all the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, this is Naomi, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. You can imagine Naomi anxious again all night, wondering, How is this plan going to work? And she sees Ruth, and her first question is, how did it go? Are you his wife or not? Right? It's like, that's a very mom type thing to say. Like, hey, are you engaged? Like, are y'all in love? Like, is this happening? And Ruth tells all that Boaz has said and he did, that Boaz will take care of everything, and her fate is now in God's hands. And she trusts Boaz, and she trusts the Lord. Naomi would know that Ruth pivoted, though, because as she's telling her all that she had said and done with Boaz, she would know that she has chosen to not only redeem herself, but also Naomi too, through playing the kinsman redeemer card with Boaz. And she presents this grain to her mother-in-law, and she says that Boaz wants me to make sure I don't come home empty. Because Naomi has experienced two types of emptiness: famine, which she had to leave her country, and childlessness. And fullness would now replace famine. A redeemer would come and right all of these things that have been wrong. So Naomi's advice to Ruth is to wait. Trust the Lord. Trust the Lord. Rest is near. Boaz is not going to rest, a play on words, until this is all completed, until you can find rest. For Naomi, Ruth has devoted her firstborn to rescue Elimelech's line. Emptiness is going to fullness. And for Ruth, she will find completeness. She will find rest because she will have an Israelite husband again. This whole passage is a quest for rest, searching for wellness, trying to fill this emptiness and this alienation, the foreign woman in a land where she's not quite accepted. It's this search for acceptance and inclusion. It's a search for provision and future. This is the essential search for everyone, is it not? We are all looking for, wellness, that we wouldn't be alienated, that we might be accepted, that we might be included, that we might have a future and have our things provided for. This is the quest for everyone. And what he said is, what we see in here is the quest for rest involves taking initiative. Right? Ruth and Naomi, they didn't just sit back and say, well, we'll see if a redeemer comes and gets us. No, that's not at all what they did. Initiative, they spotted an opportunity and they seized it. There was planning, there was risk-taking, but they never crossed any moral boundaries. They always played within the boundaries that God has provided for them. But the search for rest, if we want to find completeness, we don't just do it passively. It involves initiative, and it also involves patience, that we know when to stop and wait. Ruth had to stop and wait and lay down at Boaz's feet, not knowing how he was going to respond. And now Ruth and Naomi have to stop and wait and leave the outcome in the hands of another. Because biblical rest is a gift, and it cannot be achieved by striving alone. We must trust in the Lord. That God gives rest to those who seek him. This is what Jesus says in Matthew 11. Come to me, all who labor and who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest not just from poverty or isolation, but from spiritual emptiness and alienation from God. That our sin has placed us in a position where we are alienated from God. And through Christ, we can experience completion. We can experience fullness. That we are no longer spiritually empty, but we can be spiritually full because of what Jesus has done for us. This is his means of delivering rest, that a redeemer is coming. and has now come, Jesus the Christ. We see it glaring in this story. A Redeemer will make all of these things right, and you will experience completion. You will experience rest. And he doesn't tell us to work for it or to earn it. It is a gift. This is why Jesus says in Matthew 7, ask, seek, knock. Because when you ask, and when you seek, and when you knock, when you pursue the Lord, and you take initiative to say, like, there's something stirring in me, what is going on, God? That you will find him, and you will experience rest. So my encouragement for us this morning is seek it. Believe on Jesus today so that you might be able to find rest, completion for that which is broken in your life. Let's pray.